Right after the Civil War, men and women came to this place right here. Many people flocked to the West in that time. They felt that they could not better themselves where they were. And there was the thought of something better and more freedom and building something for themselves and their family here in the West. And that is the story that Kevin Costner is trying to tell in his new movie, Horizon. So here's why I don't think Hollywood's going to accept this film as a whole. And then at the very end, I'm gonna share with you, I'm gonna rate what I think of the film, how family friendly it is, and really some just deep thoughts on whether you should watch it yourself. When I was a kid, I used to read Louis L'Amour books and watch movies like Costner and the Cowboys, and some other John Wayne classics and Louis L'Amour classics. In those movies, there's a theme of men who, with honor, who are the protectors, who are the strong men. But lately, Hollywood and mainstream have been on a rampage to emasculate men. Women are now put in roles where they are the provider and the protector. And we have a generation of men because of this that feels guilty for being masculine. They feel guilty for being strong and respecting women with the respect that they used to get in the Old West. Now, I gotta be honest, I was actually afraid to go watch this because I had seen some of Yellowstone and it was so vulgar and it was just something I couldn't promote. Even a company that worked for Warner Bros. Contacted me about promoting the movie Horizon on my channel. And I didn't even respond because I'm like, if this is anything like Yellowstone, I don't want anything to do with it. And that is not because they're completely inaccurate. They're actually, with Yellowstone, they were making something more like The Godfather in a Western. So I can see that, but it was so filthy and so bloody and had not really a lot of sense in all the killing and everything, protecting land and smut, and really, the portrayal of men and women in that, I couldn't agree with how they lived their lives. It's not like, here, let's promote this lifestyle. I couldn't do that. So that was my thought process. And I really regret that now, because when I went and saw it, I took the time to go and see it in the theater, Horizon. And I was completely blown away by how different it really was. Horizon is the first movie in a while that I've seen with no political agenda. And I noticed throughout the movie that there's a complete lack of adherence to the Hollywood creed, which is you are always a victim of somebody and somebody owes you something. It's never your fault. Prince Charming is too masculine, and Americans should feel guilty just for being Americans. And it's very dangerous for a movie to come out that doesn't adhere to these, but also just disregards them completely, if you want Hollywood to promote your movie and make it a success. But don't think that I mean that Kevin Costner approached this movie as to let's shove it to Hollywood and their narrative, because I don't think that's what he did. I honestly think after watching the movie that Kevin Costner didn't worry about the creed of Hollywood one way or the other. What he tried to do was tell the story of those people who came out here to the West after the Civil War, what they were looking for, and the hardships they endured to make a life work here in a place that was extremely harsh on its own and was already inhabited. The portrayal of the hardships that these settlers endured out in the West, or even coming to the West, and how they struggled through them, I thought the portrayal of that in the movie was spot on. I also think that portraying the Indians in a way that some of them wanted to fight to protect their land, and some just wanted peace at any cost and saw the futility of fighting. I think that's probably very true. Horizon also did a good job in portraying the characters of both men and women, who both had to decide what they would and wouldn't do to make a living and survive in a place that was generally full of lawlessness and harsh reality. In one scene, Kevin Costner's character, Hayes, is walking up towards a house where he has an appointment with a young lady who he just met. And on the way, a young man confronts him into conversation. He's not his enemy at that point, but he's definitely a very disrespectful man and very high on his family's reputation, their bad reputation, their family name, and the lack of law. And at first, Hayes does what I would expect any of my old childhood heroes to do. Because men who really are tough don't have to prove it to everybody who attempts to inveigle them into a fight or confrontation. As this annoying young man continues to push and disrespect Hayes, it finally becomes clear to Hayes what this guy is going to do. And that is kill this young lady that he's about to visit. And even though Hayes has only just met this lady, he's willing to put his life on the line to face this man down in a life or death fight. And that's really how a man should act. Be very slow to the fight, but know when it comes down to it, that if he has the ability to do what's needed to do, that he should protect those who can't protect themselves. Well, many men of integrity would ask themselves after watching this, would I do that? Or would I succumb to my fear and not be strong enough in body and mind to be able to face this evil and stop this evil from accomplishing its goals? Great movies should have the power to move us. Not to make us feel guilty, but to build us up or show us some character flaw that we need to strengthen or train so we can get better at it. And that's what this scene did for me. This lesson of strength to protect, this idea of this type of hero, really it goes against the grain of what we're being taught today. This is really the type of hero I was looking to see from Hollywood for a long time. And it really brought back those heroes of my childhood. I actually believe that I'm starting to see people do this around me. They're starting to step up for those who are being beat up or oppressed instead of cowering and having a victim mentality. Even though Kevin Costner does not actually appear in the movie till well into the production, that doesn't mean that the first part is boring or not intriguing. One of the stories that's early on in the movie is a young boy who escapes barely with his life from a massacre that ends up killing the rest of his family. He ends up joining a group of cowboys that are out to find the Apaches who massacred these settlers. You see him have to start making choices between holding on to the hatred he has for the people who killed his family and letting go of his emotions and begin to use wisdom in his life. And there's some characters in this group that are pushing him one way towards grasping onto bitterness, and there's some that are trying to pull him towards a little bit more of the integrity way of life. I think that happens to all little boys and young men in their life. At some point, there will be something that happens that's unfair, and it doesn't go the way it should go in your life. And you have the choice to either hold on and live in bitterness or to let go and move forward in your life. And I can guarantee that letting go of that bitterness will lead to way more happiness than hanging on to it. This kind of turmoil actually led to a lot of the West being settled by men with incredible character and what may be termed as stubbornness, to where they would try to do the right thing and help others and stand up to those who harmed those people at any cost. At the same time, just as many of them grasped onto bitterness about something that happened to them out here and became very vicious, ruthless men who did whatever it took to get what they wanted, despite how many people they had to run over to get it. Both of these types of people succeeded in the West, and their ancestors are still here. I really don't know if these lines of thought and that introspection into yourself was what was intended by Kevin Costner when he made the movie Horizon. But one thing I will say is that when you tell such deep, real character stories about things that actually people dealt with and that kind of compare to our metaphors for what we actually deal with right now, the stories themselves and the strength of the characters in those stories actually lead to the introspection that I'm talking about, whether intended or not. One of the reasons I think this movie really spoke deeply to me was not just that it caused introspection and the storylines were so good, but my family settled out here. I actually have an ancestor that his name was George Clark, who was a bugler in the cavalry, and he was actually with the troop that was supposed to meet Custer out in eastern Montana when Custer was massacred. George actually lied about his age to get into the Civil War. He was only 15, and then came west with the army and stayed with them for many, many years. On the other side of my family, I have ancestors that came from Holland in the early 1900s. Now, at that time, the West was civilized, but that doesn't mean it was easy. One time, my great-great-grandfather, who didn't speak much English and was extremely poor and was taken advantage of by a lot of bankers, had to have help out in the fields farming, or he wasn't going to get done the work that needed to be done. So his wife had to help him even though she had a brand new baby. So she would take this baby and she would nurse it and place it under a tree. And they had a blue heeler dog that was very unfriendly, but extremely loyal and well behaved. And they would tell that dog to stay there and guard that child in a basket or whatever they put it in. And then she would go off to the field to work for hours. That was a time when men had to be men and the women had to be as tough as the men just to survive. And I do mean literally survive. So in conclusion, I don't think that mainstream or Hollywood will really approve of a movie like Horizon. It forces us to look too closely at our humanity, take responsibility for it, for our weaknesses and our strengths. It's just too raw and real for those who have grown up in a victim mentality and want to stay there. So now, what do I think of the movie as a whole? I will tell you this. I went to the theater and I sat for just over 3 hours. And when 3 hours had gone by, I was like, oh man, is it over? It kept my interest enthralled so much in what was going on. And many of the critics are saying, well, there's too many storylines, you can't follow anything. I think that's ridiculous. It's really delving into the reality of what's going on in this story. And it started picking up even more towards the end. I think these stories will converge at certain points. But even if they don't, they're incredible because they're showing different aspects of what was happening, the different aspects of the native people, the Indians, different aspects of the military, the cavalry that was posted out on the frontier, and the reality of people like Costner's character, which is not a person of money, it's not a person who has anything. He's just basically a cowboy drifter. And those people existed, and the women and what they had to actually do to make a living and survive without men. And the ones that had men, the people bringing women with them, especially like a pretty woman out to the West in the middle of this at that time with the law the way it was. And there's a portrayal of this in the movie, and I'm not going to give that away. I thought there was one nudity scene, and so I will give a little bit of a discount for that. I would like it to be more family friendly, but I gotta say it was way more family friendly than I thought it was going to be. It's pretty bloody. It's very bloody and very violent in the way that I would suspect it to be violent, not in an over-violent way like Yellowstone. And you'll have to see it to know what I'm talking about, but I think you'll find that that's the case. But in this nudity scene, it really isn't a sex scene at all. And they could have done without the total nudity. They could have implied the nudity, but anyway, in this, it kind of brings about something that I've always thought of, and Louis L'Amour talked about this on the plains. It's like women who are out there, you got tons of men, right, who are basically living out here with very little rules, far away from real law, right? And you have a beautiful woman standing there. That's going to be an awful temptation to do something very stupid. And people might do something more stupid than they would in the middle of a city because they feel, some people that have that little bit of evil in them already, or maybe a lack of self-control, would find it difficult to remain of good character in the West. And that's why you ended up with a lot of ruthless killers out here too. People that did horrible things. And in this case, this kind of showing this setup for how you would be a man taking a woman out here. And then, man, you would be a little protective, you better be careful because, you know, there's probably 6 men to every woman, if not 20 men to every woman. I don't know what the statistics were at that time, but it definitely wasn't 1 to 1. So that scene in there, I see why they put it in there for that reason, to kind of feed on that kind of storyline. So other than that, and one sex scene at the end where there is no nudity whatsoever, far from it, I would say I'm going to give it, out of 5, I have to knock it down a touch for the nudity, but then I'm going to put it right back up to 5. And I don't know, you can get mad at me if you want. Some people don't like Costner because they feel, well, because he did Yellowstone, and they feel he's kind of portraying that image, which I kind of did. And then some people are really mad at him for leaving Yellowstone, and so they're upset with him for that. And I was kind of of that opinion, like I said, but then when I watched it, it changed my opinion altogether because I feel he's really trying to tell a real story, like something that would actually happen. It was like putting you in the place of coming out here, why you would come out here, to get out of your dead-end life, and the freedom that was implied when you got out here. So I thought it was extremely well done. I cannot wait for the second episode of this. I can't wait to see it again when it comes out of the theaters, because I think there's probably a lot that I missed. But like I said, one of the reasons I gave it a 5, even though I almost felt like it was moving along a little slowly, but then it was over. And I was like, what in the hell? 3 hours went by. So it obviously wasn't moving slowly. It was paced more like an old Western than I was used to from my childhood. Obviously, it was a little faster than that, but I think that's why it felt a little slower. It wasn't like blow everything up, try to keep your attention with pyrotechnics. It was actually telling a story, and maybe that's why it felt a little slower. Anyway, I thought it was a great way to show the strength and character of what these people had that came out here, and what they had to endure, and what they were facing, and why they would do it. That's why I gave it a 5. So keep in mind, it's not kid-friendly because it's very bloody, and that one sex scene and the little bit of nudity towards the end. And other than that, that's my opinion of Horizon, and why Hollywood probably won't come out and really get behind this thing, because it kind of goes against the way they're portraying men and women. So I'm Trinity Vandenaker. Thanks for sticking with me, and I will see you next time. I'm hoping to get out another video here, at least 2 more by the end of this week. So until then, God bless.